Okay, and we're on.
Hey, late night from Willowdale. We haven't done a video in a long time. We're not in Willowdale. We're here in Midtown Toronto, at St. Clair and Spadina, Winston Churchill Park. And just want to do a quick video about the end of America's longest war in Afghanistan. You guys see the headlines here. I'll just pull them up. Longest war ends. I always like to show the newspapers and stuff. Biden defends U.S. exit. And then there's this Biden's Afghan fiasco. That was the Financial Times. So that's what I'll focus this video, and I want to keep it just a few minutes because our videos tend to ramble. So on Monday night, the U.S. war in Afghanistan ended, and that was a good thing. 20 years. The Americans spent between $1 and $2 trillion. They were on this war. They were estimating it was like $200 million a day. It had to end, and Biden made the right decision. The way it ended was chaotic, and it was obviously not the way I'm sure anyone wanted to see this go. But you know, wars don't end elegantly; they end messy, and this was messy. There was no easy way for the United States and its NATO partners to exit from Afghanistan easily. There was always going to be screw-ups, but you got to look at it in some ways. They evacuated well over 100,000 people. I don't know what the total tally was, but you think in 2 weeks, two and a half weeks, that was pretty impressive. It was one of the biggest evacuations, I think, in the modern era. And other than the fact that there was that suicide bombing by the crazy ISIS-K and killed American servicemen and women and a whole bunch of Afghan citizens, which was horrible. But by and large, it was a pretty impressive evacuation. Now, I'm not going to dwell on that. There's going to be lots of analysis of how it could have been done better. No one expected the Taliban to take over the country as quickly as they did, and no one expected the Afghan security forces to collapse the way they did. And yes, there were lots of intelligence reports that the Americans should have known better, that this was the Afghan security forces were collapsing, the Taliban was advancing. The Taliban had a brilliant military strategy, the way they did it, coercing villagers, forcing. The Taliban had a brilliant strategy, the way they took over villages and towns and got the Afghan military to basically surrender. And yes, the Americans should have seen this coming, but it happened so quickly, and there'll be and these things are never black and white. And before you know it, the Taliban was in Kabul in the middle of August, and the whole thing was over. And there'll be lots of analysis and all of this of what went wrong and how it got a little screwy at the end. But there was, like I said, you can't exit a 20-year war elegantly. There are always going to be missteps and screw-ups, and it's not going to be pleasant. So, saying all that, Biden's decision to leave Afghanistan was the right one. Okay, and Biden's decision to reduce the U.S. military footprint in the world is the right one. That's what we should want. The U.S. needs to be less involved on the planet Earth. They need to focus on their own domestic problems. I mean, let's face it, there's an American Taliban, right? I mean, the Taliban, all these nutty, crazy people who rioted on January 6th in the U.S. at the U.S. Capitol. I mean, that's the American Taliban. They got their own Taliban to worry about internally. And the Americans have so many problems internally. Infrastructure issues, very polarized society, people that don't want to get vaccinated and all that. We saw with Hurricane Ida in the last week how America totally needs to upgrade its infrastructure. The subway's being flooded in New York City. The Americans need to upgrade their infrastructure for climate change, because that's one country that's going to be really hit hard by climate change. The levees seem to have held in Louisiana and New Orleans. But back in Katrina, 16 years ago in Katrina, they collapsed because they weren't funded properly. The Dutch spent billions of dollars on levees and on dikes and all that. The North Sea Protection Works protects Holland from the most vicious North Sea storms, and Holland, which is the Netherlands, which is basically below sea level, a good chunk of it is protected because the Dutch spend billions of dollars on this stuff. The Americans need to start spending billions of dollars on this stuff and not putting it in wars. The Afghan war, they say $1 to $2 trillion, basically almost $200 million a day. No, the Americans need to spend that on their own country. So it's time to get out of Afghanistan. It's time to lessen the U.S. military footprint in the world. You need to get out of Iraq, which I think they will be doing slowly over the next 6 to 7 months, and they need to focus on their own domestic issues. But the weird thing is, the crazy thing is, America's not withdrawing from the world. The United States still has 800 military bases in 70 countries. 800 military bases in 70 countries. They still have the world's largest military by far bigger than all their adversaries. They spend like $700-800 billion on the military. The U.S., has massive bases in South Korea, Japan. They have massive bases in Germany. They have like 11 carrier groups, aircraft carrier groups that roam the world. No other country has that. So, the U.S. is hardly withdrawing from the world. That's such a joke. The media has just gone totally over the top on that one. And I think Biden really wants to reduce the U.S. military footprint. And the U.S. needs to also reduce its military budget. It's crazy. A smaller military would be better for the Americans, would be better for everyone. Less U.S. military involvement in the world is better for everybody. And there's criticism from Europeans, as I thought was a bit of a joke. They're kind of feckless, and they obviously depend on U.S. security guarantees and U.S. defense spending, and whether it's NATO or here or there or everywhere. So I always thought that. I thought the criticism from the Europeans was a bit of a joke. But in this other thing I want to talk about, and we're sitting in the park here, my good friend Gabriel Coco, who used to live right there, he was a history professor at York University, wrote many books on U.S. foreign policy, classics like Anatomy of a War, which studied the Vietnam War and how the U.S. lost in Vietnam. And I'm sure that book will be revisited now, looking at Afghanistan. I remember the Pentagon, Gabriel Coco told me the Pentagon, the U.S. Defense Department, bought like 500 copies of his book because they wanted to read how they lost the war in Vietnam.
That's funny.
Yeah, I know. They wanted, and Gabriel Coco wrote tons of books on American foreign policy. And one of his key things was credibility, the U.S. obsession with credibility. And boy, anyone watching this video will have heard that over and over again. U.S. credibility. U.S. has lost its credibility in the world because of this Afghan. Look at that headline in the Financial Times: Biden's Afghanistan fiasco. Credibility. This obsession with credibility. It's cost the U.S. It gets the U.S. into a lot of problems. This credibility fixation. U.S. credibility is on the line. It's just, come on. The U.S. doesn't have. What is it with this? credibility. You know, Marsha. America's the most powerful country in the world, the most powerful economy, most powerful military. They don't have to prove anything to anyone. And Biden, and people criticize, well, a lot of people weren't consulted when we left, this withdrawal, but they knew what was going on. The French, the Brits, Canadians, the Germans, everyone knew what was going on. Biden wanted out, and no other country is moving in. The Europeans were thinking of keeping a military presence in Afghanistan, and they realized they couldn't do it without American support. So, yeah, criticism from American allies is a joke. The U.S. doesn't have to worry about its credibility. Credibility fixation gets the Americans into problems. The U.S. needs to withdraw from the world, focus more, as we were talking earlier, Colleen, on diplomatic and humanitarian assistance. And it has a huge diplomatic corps, it has a lot of influence, and it needs to use its military sparingly. So, and in terms of Canada, we weren't really consulted. Canada lost well over 150 souls in Afghanistan, and we weren't really consulted. Biden really didn't consult us either, because we're a middle power, and who cares about Canada? But Canada went in there, got people out, and obviously, as I said, we lost 150, more than 100, I think 158 people in Afghanistan. But Canada, one thing Canada can do is take in refugees and Afghans. We could easily probably settle 50,000 Afghans in this country. We resettled 50,000 Syrians with no problem. The one thing Canada can actually do, we're not a big military power or this or that, but Canadians are very welcoming of refugees. We don't have that anti-immigrant thing that goes on in Europe and the United States. Because Canadians know that immigrants are great for this country, and they'll help out. We're up at Goulding Park, and you live in Little Persia. Tons of Iranian immigrants, tons of Koreans. Bring 50,000 Afghans into Canada. They'll easily resettle. They'll be absorbed in communities, and that's one thing Canada can do. So that's one thing I hope.
There's Canadians that don't contribute to the Canadian economy as much as immigrants do, right?
Exactly. So immigrants are great for Canada. That's the great thing about Canada. Most Canadians want immigrants. They're very welcoming of immigrants. So I hope we've taken thousands of Afghans who want to live here. Now, of course, you don't want to deprive Afghanistan of the best and the brightest, but until the country stabilizes and maybe the Taliban shows that it can actually govern and doesn't treat people like crap and murder people and all that. But Afghanistan, going back to this about nation building, it's not the job of the West, the United States, NATO, Canada, wherever, to nation build. It doesn't work. You can't impose your own value systems on these countries. There's tons of books written about imperialism and colonial adventures, whether it's the Portuguese, the Brits, the Dutch, the Americans. They don't work. You can't impose your systems and values on these countries, on indigenous peoples. It doesn't work. And Afghanistan's the classic example. They don't call it the graveyard of empires. It's a cliche, right? But it's true. The Russians and then the Soviets and the Brits many times. It's so funny because the Afghanistan had a couple of weeks ago they celebrated Independence Day in 1919. That was Independence Day from the Brits. This is a country that is pushed back all invaders. But now it's their country again. Let's see what they can do with it. And then there's the regional implications of this withdrawal. Pakistan is it's a horrible place. They took American money, American military aid. They funded the Taliban. They funded
the Mujahideen.
The Mujahideen, but also the Taliban. The
Taliban came after the Mujahideen. After a lot of expatriates or kids that went to Pakistan to learn, the Taliban actually took their soldiers from these kids from madrasas in Pakistan, right? But the Taliban and the Mujahideen are actually very separate. They're very...
The Taliban, and now this video is going on longer than it should, the Taliban grew out of the instability in Afghanistan in the 1990s. the Soviets had actually left a pretty good government in Afghanistan when they withdrew in 1989 under Najibullah. He was progressive. Women had rights. Then it all went south. But the Russians, the Soviets then, had left a pretty good progressive government under Najibullah in Afghanistan, and then the Taliban took over and all went, and they hung Najibullah. And it's too bad because Najibullah actually did a pretty good job. Pakistan has played a notorious duplicitous game, funding the Taliban, giving and taking American military aid. It's a horrible country. Pakistan is as I've said many times, is a failed state. It's a crazy state. I kind of hope Pakistan gets destabilized by all of this. And I've always believed that India should retake Pakistan. I never agreed with partition. I think Pakistan belongs to be part of India.
Which is a horrible place as well. India is a horrible place for Muslims as well.
At least India is somewhat democratic. And I know Modi's trying to change the place, but India still survives as a democratic country. They have the regional elections, and Modi got defeated in West Bengal, and so yeah. Anyways, I'm rambling on. I kind of hope Afghanistan becomes a problem for the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, and the Pakistanis, and I could let them deal with it. I can see Biden putting his feet on the Resolute desk in the Oval Office and saying, now it's your problem, and it's true, it's a regional problem. Let the regional countries deal with Afghanistan, So we'll see where it all goes. China and Russia are trying to jockey for influence, the new great game, but it could be problematic. So yeah, go for it, guys. Chinese want to get more involved in Afghanistan. Hey, have fun. Anyways, I rambled on. There's so much to say on this topic. The bottom line here is Biden has made the right decision to reduce the U.S. military footprint in the world. Afghanistan first, hopefully Iraq, and hopefully other places. And the U.S. needs to focus on domestic issues. And the world will be a better place with a lesser U.S. footprint. And there's so many books written on this. Isolationism by Charles Kupchan, we've highlighted that. It's still available. Tomorrow the World by Stephen Wertheimer, great book. It's still available. This book by Robert Zoellick is a very good book. He's a former U.S. diplomat, former president of the World Bank, very bright guy. And he looks at America's place in the world and he talks about how the U.S. should withdraw and can't be everywhere, can't be the world's policeman. And this book is still available. This is the guy that got us into all the problems, but this book is available by the former president, George Bush.
Who's now more popular than Trump, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
who's stupid now, right?
He got us into all this.
Right.
And this book has nothing to do with Afghanistan, although a lot of people have compared Biden to Jimmy Carter because, the Iranian hostage crisis destroyed Jimmy Carter's presidency. But this came out, easily available. The Outlier by Kai Bird, used to work at The Nation. Jimmy Carter, the forgotten American president, but he was a very good American president, a one-term president. He did a lot of great things. His accomplishments are underrated, and this is a great book. Everyone knows I like Jimmy Carter. He was my president of my youth, but he restored relations with China. He gave the Panama Canal back to the Panamanians. He got Israel its first peace treaty, Camp David Accords with Egypt. The first peace treaty Israel got, peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. There are a lot of things he did. He was smart. He even had solar power units on the White House.
Which they removed eventually.
Which Reagan removed. He had solar power units in the White House, which Reagan removed. So Carter was a bright guy, still alive, 96. His presidency is being revisited, thank God, because he deserves a better he deserves
A one-term salute.
Yeah, he was a one-term salute. You always talk about George H.W. Bush as being a great one-term president. Well, this was also a great one-term president, Jimmy Carter. And I only mention that because a lot of people compare Biden now to Carter. Well, the Iranian hostage crisis destroyed Carter's presidency, which in a sense it did. But they're saying, well, this fiasco in Afghanistan is going to destroy Biden. I don't think it will. First of all, it's early in Biden's presidency.
I think once his omnibus bills go through, like, he'll be fine.
Yeah, if he gets those infrastructure bills through, he'll be fine.
Yeah.
And as we know, the Americans need infrastructure spending, especially what we saw with Hurricane Ida.
True.
That just ravaged the Northeast, southern U.S., and all that. And this is, if you like Eisenhower, and Eisenhower was a very interesting president. This is a great book by Gene Edward Smith, who passed away a few years ago. Eisenhower's, in many ways, he was a military general, obviously World War II famous. It was under his presidency that they overthrew the Guatemalan government, by the way. But he also was a bit of a peacenik. He was a general, but distrusted generals and distrusted the military complex. And he was the one who termed that phrase, right? The military-industrial complex. So this book is still available. Gene Edward Smith, another guy I used to teach at U of T, and I got to interview him. Another very bright guy. Anyways, rambled on. But no one's going to watch this whole video anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But lots to talk about. But the bottom line is Biden made the right decision to get out of Afghanistan. He's making the right decision to reduce the U.S. military footprint in the world. And the world will be a better place for it. And it's so great to talk about this in the shadow of Gabriel Kokel's former apartment. Gabriel Kokel, who passed away a few years back. And
which one is it? The round one or the square one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Gabriel Kokel would have had a lot to say about this Afghanistan thing. But he would have totally agreed with Biden's decision to get out. And Biden made the right decision, and he'll be proven right in history. So I've rambled on, and I know most of you won't even watch this whole video. You won't even watch the first few minutes. So doesn't matter. Beautiful September night here in Midtown Toronto, and probably a lot more to say, but that's it. This is our first video in many months, and most of you won't watch it anyway. So anyways, that's it. I think
was there anything else? No, I can't think of anything else.
I can't think of anything else. The point of this video was to say Biden made the right decision to get out, despite all the criticism, despite the way it was handled. I thought it was handled as best it could be. There were missteps on the way, but there's no easy way to end a war, no elegant way to end a war, and Americans need to reduce their military footprint in the world. The Americans need to withdraw from the world a bit. The world would be a better place for it. And
well, anybody who can save $2 trillion, I mean, that's...
and if they can spend trillions of dollars on their own country, that would be a good thing. And we saw what Hurricane Ida, and those are linked. Hurricane Ida, the damage done, and leaving Afghanistan. It's about the Americans need to put money into their own infrastructure and their own country. And the bottom line is Canada should take in thousands of Afghans, and that would be good for this country. And that's it.
Okay.